So, when you don't know how to do something, how to fix something, or how something works, what do? Ask a teacher? Ask your parents? Ask your friends? Ask someone you really know and trust? No! You go to the internet and ask some randos. But I'm not talking about creeps here, I hope. No, I mean the people of the internet! You know, those people who make how-to videos. Because chances are, if you're trying to figure out something, someone on the internet has already figured it out for you. Things like, how do I unsend a text? No. How do I do a winged eyeliner? How do I get rid of the zit by Friday night? How do I get out of gym class? How do I screen cap Snapchat without getting caught? They'll never know. But then there are things in life that don't have an easy fix, that don't have a simple solution, that don't have a how-to video. Things like what to do when you have problems with family, or when it seems like you have no control in your life, or what to do when someone has done something to you. I mean, clearly, they gotta go. The truth is, there's a lot of life that doesn't have a solution you can just find online. So how do you know what to do when you don't know what to do?
Good morning and happy Father's Day and welcome to Gathering Youth. It's going to be a great day. We're continuing a series we started last week called What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. But today is Father's Day, and so first of all, I encourage you, reach out to your dads, tell them Happy Father's Day, tell them what they mean to you, give them a hug, leave them alone if that's what they want, whatever. It's Father's Day, celebrate them. But so today we're actually going to talk a little bit about fathers, but we're talking about it through the context of a story of a guy called Joseph. Now, if you missed last week's message, Joseph is one of the key characters in the Bible. But Joseph's life is basically a series of unfortunate events. He goes through a lot of turmoil and makes a lot of mistakes. But throughout all of those, God continues to use him. God continues to guide his path, and God eventually takes him to be the second most powerful man in Egypt. He ends up saving his entire people, his entire nation, because of what he went through. And so we're continuing the story. So when he was younger, Joseph was one of the youngest sons of a guy named Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. That's a lot of siblings, but he had 12 sons. And Joseph was his favorite. See, Jacob gave Joseph a coat of many colors, basically a really, really, really expensive jacket. Basically, signed Jordans would be what it is today. That's what it was, very expensive, and it showed that Joseph was his favorite. And so Joseph has his dad who favors him and loves on him more than any of his other brothers, and his brothers grow to hate that. And Joseph ends up getting these dreams that God gives him about Joseph being elevated and Joseph becoming a great man and Joseph being lifted high. And Joseph tells his brothers that, and they end up plotting to kill him. And that's where we're going to pick up the story today. We're going to pick it up, but here's some things I want to encourage you as we look through this. One, this message should directly speak to anxiety. That's what I'm trying to communicate here, because that's what I want to talk about, because that's something I deal with a lot, and I know a lot of us deal with anxiety. And so that's what this passage is going to deal with. So when we read this passage, and we read it together, I want you to look at it through the lens of being anxious, being fearful, being afraid of what's happening and coming up, being out of control, because that's where most of our anxiety comes from. It comes from being out of control, or things being out of our control. So let's jump into the scripture real quick. Let's go into Genesis 37. We're going to start on verse 18. It says, they saw him from afar. This is the brothers seeing Joseph. So they saw him from afar. And before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. So this is them plotting together, conspiring to kill their brother. They see him from a long distance. They say, we're going to kill him. They say, here, there's a pit over here. It's a big cistern. These would have been very common where they were. In fact, you can find these all over a region of the world called the Levant. These were deep cisterns. These were not like wells that you see at a farmhouse where they got like, the bucket that goes down. No, these were huge. In fact, they would have these like tight bottlenecks where at the top you would have what looked like a regular well, but then as it went lower, it was this huge basin, and it would be carved out of solid rock. And so there would be no way to escape it. In fact, these were actually used as prisons as well throughout that period because they were so well at keeping people in. You didn't have to put bars on them or anything. There was no way people were getting out. In fact, funny story, back in the 50s and 60s, archaeologists would actually find themselves getting trapped in these. In fact, one archaeologist got stuck in one for 2 days and almost died. This is a guy that's a genius, and so he couldn't figure out how to get out of it. It shows you that Joseph would never have figured out how to get out of it. But so anyway, they planned to throw him in there and tell their dad that an animal devoured him. And then we see, it says, but when Reuben heard it, Reuben is one of the brothers. It says, but when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said to him, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. And so that's the end. Notice there's the end of the quotation marks. Reuben has stopped talking. But then we get a peek into Reuben's mind. It says, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore to his father. So Reuben, one of the brothers, says, hey, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in the pit. And then Reuben thinks, all right, once they've all, thrown him in the pit, I'm going to come back later tonight and get him out of the pit and take him home. That way he'll be safe. So that's what's happened. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty and there was no water in it, so it wouldn't have drowned him. It was just a dry prison cell, basically. Then they sat down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah, one of the other brothers, said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then the Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. So what's now happened? Well, they've thrown Joseph in the pit. They go to sit and eat lunch around the pit, and then they see a caravan, basically a big group of traders called Ishmaelites, coming through the desert, and they're heading to Egypt, and they're bringing gum, and they're bringing myrrh, and they're bringing balms, and they're bringing stuff to go trade in Egypt. And so the brother says, Judah says, well, why should we kill him for free when we can sell him into slavery and make a little bit of money off him? And he's greedy. And then he also tries to, hide his greed by saying, well, he's our brother. He tries to hide his greed and his mistakes. This is not something new to us. People always try and coat evil things in a good wrapping. That's not something that's new. We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. But so they take Joseph to Egypt. And there's something I also want to focus on here that's really interesting is who actually took Joseph. The Ishmaelites. Now, that may ring a bell, that might not. But Joseph's great-grandfather, his name was Abraham. And Abraham had two sons. One he bore out of wedlock. His name was Ishmael. And there was one that he bore with his wife. His name was Isaac. Ishmael he had to send away, and Ishmael would later become the grandfather of the Ishmaelites. And in fact, Ishmael is who the modern day Muslims trace their ancestry through to Ishmael. But see, what's so interesting here is the fact that God used the Ishmaelites to take Joseph from where he was to Egypt. That God used a past mistake, because Abraham was not supposed to have his son Ishmael, that God would use a past mistake to take Joseph from where he was not supposed to be to where he was supposed to be, taking him from the pit to Egypt. And that's a message for us too, that God that even if you think that you don't have any control anymore over your past, God is in complete control. He will use the things and the people of your past to take you from where you're not supposed to be and move you to where God is calling you to be. But then let's continue this story. When Reuben returned to the pits, you remember the brother has left, he's come back, he's gone to rescue Joseph, and he saw that Joseph was not in the pit. He tore his clothes, which would have been, shown that he was upset and sad, and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood, and they sent the robe of many colors to the father and said, "This is what we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." Then he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without a doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob, the dad, tore his garments and put a sackcloth on his loins and mourned him, his son, for many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He says, "No, I shall go down to Sheol with my son, mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him, Joseph, in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guards. And that's where we end this story today. But there's so much here. That last paragraph has so much meat there that most of the time that I've read this story, I've honestly just kind of skipped it. That, oh man, the dad is sad. He mourns for 22 years. That, the brothers told him that his son had died. But then I began to read that story, and I began to read it some more. And I realized, first of all, the brothers never told Jacob that they had killed his son. They had never told Jacob that an animal had killed his son. They just took the robes with the blood on it and said, "We found this. Is this your son's robes?" It's Jacob, the dad, that implies and thinks and says, "A fierce animal has devoured my son, and he is surely torn to pieces." See, the sons never told the dad that. They never told him that. And then it's really interesting, too, that Jacob mourned for 22 years this. And so that got me thinking about how many times in our life have we mourned for something that was not really dead? How many times have you found yourself, or maybe you're doing it now, you're mourning for something that is not dead? You're mourning for a dream that's not dead. You're mourning for somebody that's left your family, and you think they're never coming back. Maybe you're mourning for, something that you thought was in your future. And now because something has happened to you, you think this future is gone from you, and so you've mourned it like it was dead. And so that's not what's supposed to happen. See, Jacob was not supposed to mourn his son because his son was not dead. But let's look at a few things in the story. First of all, this story should give you a lot of hope. And you're like, okay, wait, what? No, that's crazy. Look, no, it's not. Because look, first of all, Joseph was supposed to have died out there. They were going to kill Joseph. It was 11 against 1. They were going to kill Joseph. Now, Joseph may have been a good fighter. He could not have taken 11 of his older brothers. Not going to happen. And yet, God gave Reuben, one of his brothers, mercy. And so God saved him from certain death. And then two, what is just so cool is we see God's power even in this thing. See, God is looking at the big picture. See, what we're seeing is just a snippet of Joseph's story. There's so much more to come. But we see that God is moving Joseph from a place he was not supposed to be, this pit, to Egypt, where God was going to use him in incredible ways. And he had to use the Ishmaelites, these mistakes, this past mistake. God had to use this to get Joseph to Egypt from where he was. Now, why does this all matter? Because we've got to change our mindset with how we look on our situations. See, so many of us, and I'm guilty too. I'm the same way. I look at my situation first, and then after I've said this situation is impossible, do I go to the Bible? Like it's like I'm stuck with looking at a room first and then trying to figure out who's in it. it seems off and it seems wrong. See, that's why so many of us have so much anxiety and so much frustration, because we're looking at our situation first and then turning to God. When in fact, a posture should be looking to God first, knowing who God is, knowing that He is sovereign, that He is working all things for good, and then turning to our situation. You've got to frame your mindset. If you don't frame your mindset, that's where you find anxiety, that's when you find control issues, that's when you find all of that. Because you've framed the mindset of, instead of God being in control, I'm in control, and when I no longer have control, I got to go to God. And so that's the wrong kind of mindset, and that's not how to do it. So what to do when you don't know what to do? Frame your mindset. Frame it on God. Frame it that He is in control. And as we're going to see throughout the next few weeks, is we're going to see God shape Joseph's life through, again, there's more obstacles to come, but God is building Joseph into somebody that God can use to save a nation. And so I encourage you, don't miss out, don't check out, come next week, see the message next week as we continue our talk and our discussion about what to do when we don't know what to do, as we continue to follow Joseph's path through Egypt. Thank you so much for joining us today. I love you guys. Can't wait to see you next time. Have a good one.